Hi there. You're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, the day is finally here. Video game, the video game we've all been waiting for the day before has dropped. And it has lost 80% of its player base in the first 3 days. So it's not good.
Yeah, it has to be a bit of a record. I don't know the biggest player base drop-off in history ever is, but 80% is pretty bad.
Pretty bad. So for those who don't know, the day before was meant to be a massive multiplayer online survival experience. Sort of imagine if you've ever played The Division, sort of that open world RPG type thing that you can play with friends, but more open world. And then there was the whole kind of like a survivalist kind of experience from something like DayZ or The Last of Us. And the trailers look great. Everything looked incredible. People have been hyped up for this game for 2 years. And it turns out it might, in fact, be not real. So, Tom, you did a little bit of research as our senior games correspondent. You did a bit of research into this over the last week, and you've been uncovering some interesting information about Fntastic, the developer of The Day Before. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, I guess not so much maybe just some stuff about the developer per se, but I just wanted to kind of look at the before and after of this situation from the fresh knowledge that not only has it dropped an 80% player base, I guess, to get everyone up to speed. Yeah, not only did the game come out in an early access state, and we'll throw to Adam later, I reckon he'll have a good rant about early access.
Early access just enrages me.
Which, yeah, we'll explain later. But so it launched in its early access state. People were like, this isn't what we were expecting it to be. I feel ripped off. 80% of the player base drops, and I think about 4 days after that initial launch, the actual the development company, which I'm not sure how they intend people to pronounce this, but I'll give it a crack. Fntastic, because
people just say fantastic, but it's Fntastic.
Yeah, so Fntastic, whatever. Announced that they were shutting their doors and liquidating, disappearing, whatever. Like shutting. We are no longer a company.
Yeah.
Which in 4 days is pretty amazing.
See ya.
So the servers are still online for people to play it if they haven't asked for refunds
for now.
But also it is not available for purchase anymore.
No.
So
on the Steam store, like you can still see the page.
Listed. You can't purchase it. It's been pulled from sale. Like the response to this has been quite amazing.
Yeah. So after 2 years, they've been sort of hyping up this game, and then so been sort of teasing it, putting together these really, sort of cool looking trailers. People go, this looks great. And then as time goes on, it just kind of keeps getting dragged out and pushed out, and announcements, and then they announce the announcement, and then the announcement doesn't happen, it gets pushed out. And then there was a trademark issue and it gets pushed out again. So
it's a trademark issue with a weather app.
They just
the title was called The Day Before, and I don't know. Yeah, there's a weather app that has a similar name. I don't know. That was really weird. That was a weird couple of weeks.
They kept catfishing people during this whole process where they're like, oh, we're about to give you some more information about The Day Before. And then it's like, actually, it's this unrelated project, Prop Night, this other game that we made that you can go and buy. And so they haven't capitalized too much on early access and pre-orders and that sort of stuff where people pay money up front and then get the game later. But they have sort of use the hype surrounding this game to push consumers towards other products which they can, capitalize on monetarily right now. And so there's been this underlying feeling of hey, does this game really exist? They've sort of reused a bunch of assets from other games in terms of cobbling it together. And then obviously people get to finally play it, and then it's a buggy mess. It got a 1 out of 10 from IGN, the review site.
Low.
And so a lot of people are speculating, is this the producer's style scam where it's easier to raise a bunch of money to build this game and then immediately close everything down and say, oh, we fold as a company and just take the money and run, than it is to actually build a game that works and maintain. Because the costly part, I would assume, of a game's life cycle is not just building the game, but then also maintaining the servers, patching making continuous changes over time. Like if you've got a big game with lots of players,
an online game, yeah,
like the server cost and keeping that up and running over time is pretty expensive. So if you were looking to take the money and run, launching the game, getting a bunch of people to buy it, and then closing the company down would be the way to go about it. So,
well, yeah, right.
As far as we know, the developers haven't fled the country or done anything.
Well, they've closed down.
That.
So they announced on Twitter.
They're for bankruptcy.
They announced on Twitter, today we announced the closure of Fntastic Studio. Unfortunately, the day before has failed financially, and they make that assumption from, and we lack the funds to continue. All income received is being used to pay off debts to our partners, which is basically a way of saying you're not getting any fucking refunds, right? We invested all our efforts, resources, and man hours into the development of the day before, which was our first huge game. We really wanted to release new patches to reveal the full potential of the game, but unfortunately we don't have the funding to continue the work. Even though there was a whole thing about them using volunteers and like not paying people to do work for them. They said, no, but none of the volunteers are developers. The volunteers are doing like other things like community management or whatever. Like, yeah, the whole thing was sus as fuck.
Like other big jobs though. Like
it's
other jobs that are worthy of employment.
That are worth money. Yeah.
Like, yes.
It's important to note that we didn't take any money from the public during the development of the day before. There were no pre-orders or crowdfunding campaigns. We worked tirelessly for 5 years, pouring our blood, sweat, and tears into the game. It's very defensive for a statement. At the moment, the future of the day before and prop night is unknown, but the servers will remain operational. We apologize if we didn't meet your expectations. We did everything within our power, but unfortunately, we miscalculated our capabilities. Creating games is an incredibly challenging endeavor. We're grateful to everyone who supported us during these difficult years. It's been a fantastic journey, over the last 8 years. And then they have a timeline, which just reeks to me of like, look, we're a real company. We did things. 2015, opening of the studio. 2017, release of The Wild 8. 2018, release of Dead Dozen. Release of Radiant 1. Release of Prop Night. Release of The Day Before. So all these other games that they've created are much more basic games. Right, to create
not as large in scope, not as ambitious.
A massive multiplayer online open world experience is would be a huge endeavor, which is why there aren't any really good versions of that available out in the world right now. Like that is a hard type of game to pull off, and it's something that like clearly the public wants. Because when this game or other games like it come out in early access, people get really hyped for it. They put in a bunch of pre-orders, get a bunch of money in for these types of games. And they always end up being kind of disappointing. Like, it's a running joke that like if you want to get a bunch of pre-order dollars, all you need to say is you're putting together an open world, massive multiplayer online
zombie survival
post-apocalyptic zombie survival game, and everyone would just like take my money. Just throw, it's the same premise as DayZ or Rust without the zombies. But like it's really hard to make something like that work.
Yeah, and I'd argue it's almost impossible as well because so when I was I had a bit of a watch this morning of
tell us about
I wanted to look back at like, what was the initial announcement for the day before, and like, so what were people so hyped up about? Because all those articles over the past couple of years that have been like the most wish listed game on Steam was the day before, and I was like, this is I'm a huge nerd. This was barely on my radar. But so I went back and I watched the initial trailer, and the initial trailer, looked gorgeous. Like, it had like some good, like really good looking graphics.
Lots of puddles to reflect off.
Lots of reflective puddles. No puddle gate here. For those who remember Spider-Man. But yeah, so really good quality looking stuff. Environmental effects. The characters were well detailed. There was like cloth physics on like the main character, like the player character who pops out his jacket, his trench coat, stuff like that.
Like the trench coat is flapping in the wind, sort of thing.
Like it's responding to the environment around it, and like there was a lot of detail in the texture work and stuff like that. But it also, which I can't believe people maybe didn't really feel suspicious about this game already, was, well, not suspicious, but more cynical. Like showing it as a team or multiplayer experience, it was loaded with, like trailer player chat. Whenever you're showing off like a game like The Division or whatever, and they're like, let's show this off, and it's all like, all right, Mike, I'm gonna head over here. Roger that, Tim. Like, yeah, like we're doing all this. Like, you're hearing people who are clearly like there for the marketing and the bigging it up, being like, and real players will be able to talk to each other. It's like, that's not what game chat's like at all. And like these two guys pull up, like, well, we're out of fuel. Better get out and find some. And they're like, all right, I'll go this way. I'm going to check out this skyscraper. Alrighty. Then one walks up to a car and he opens it to show like a loot mechanic opens up an inventory management, and inside was like some ammo and a cowboy hat. And he was like, oh, all right. I found a cowboy hat. Like, yeah, it's cool. And then the other guy says, all right, slow down, cowboy. I'm like, who talks to each other like this? No one talks to each other like this when playing games.
Obviously, all these things are scripted. Whenever they drop these are scripted.
And so that's what I mean. Like, and it feels like and of course, because you're doing a trailer, you don't just fucking freeball your MMO in a trailer because you can't control that, right? So, and then they go through some more experiences of like the player enters a shop where he is getting some loot and another group turns up. And so then showing like, the players could turn up and they might not be friendlies and they have a firefight and all this sort of stuff. The shooting looked kind of shit. I felt when I went back and looked at the start, like some zombies turn up and he shoots it with a shotgun in the chest and it barely reacts to it. And I'm like, and this is the original trailer. So yeah, and then that ended. And I was like,
this is when they're giving it like as much kind of like razzle dazzle sparkle where, you know, like you can create a video game trailer that looks good without building a whole game. You're just building a certain area or a certain level and doing a little bit of it and showing that specific thing that you've elected to show them to make it look as though you've got a whole game that looks as good as this. But if the code's not well optimized, like expanding that to the whole world means, it'll look really performant and really sexy on this one little tiny level that I've built. But if you expanded that to the whole world, or the actual game would be laggy as fuck and terrible and like wouldn't respond as well. So there's a lot of little tricks in the video game industry that they use to make it look good. But this is like even beyond what we expect. Like, this is not gameplay footage. This is like cutscene footage, and it looks especially good. Like it's even beyond just the normal tricks that video game studios do to make things look good, right?
The thing I found a little interesting then, because that was the debut trailer, and that was like 2 years ago. Like that was the announcement kind of thing of proof of concept that got people really excited. So then I went looking for, all right, so what followed up from that? And YouTube recommended me. And these are videos. So while the developer, after this disastrous launch, has pulled down all this stuff, IGN, like the biggest gaming media outlet in the world, still has these things up as well. So I went to the next sort of list in the IGN playlist. It was like a 10-minute gameplay clip from 10 months ago. So yeah, like the start of this year. So it was like, all right, we're jumping forward a bit. And oh my God, I don't know how people weren't immediately turned off it back then, because it was like there was no voice chat happening in the trailer at all. Like a player character and another like person in their team are walking along. None of the scripted like, all right, slow down, cowboy kind of stuff. And of course, in the final version, as people complained about in the reviews, there is no in-game voice chat in this massively multiplayer online game, allegedly.
How is that supposed
there's
to work?
no in-game voice chat, all that sort of stuff. And so there isn't in this one from like 10 months ago. But also the texture details had just plummeted, and it's just so quiet, just plodding along concrete. I mean, I know like there'll be lots of games that are actually good that fit this description as well, but like just plonking along with your footsteps, looking in rooms, picking up some shit. They upgrade their guns a little bit. They encounter some zombies. They shoot them. No talking, no nothing, no excitement, no whatever. And I watched this for 10 minutes and I was like, yeah, this looks like something that'll release in early access and there'll be barely fucking anything to do in it. And maybe it'll come good in a couple years, or maybe it won't. That's exactly what's going to happen. And look what happened.
Do you guys think it was a scam? Like, do you think they ever intended on releasing a full game and like actually servicing it and keeping it like live? Or because it really seems to me like they released a trailer, everyone got mad hype, it kind of got a bit out of hand, and they're like, well, let's see if we can get them to buy some other games that we're making. We'll kind of build the plane as we're falling off the cliff, and like maybe it'll work out, maybe not. Either way, we'll take the money and run.
Nah,
Like,
see, I don't think.
no,
While I
it's-
think that's plausible, sort of based on what we've seen, I think it is more of a they had their their glam early trailer, and the hype exploded, and then man's imagination outstretched his grasp or whatever the expression is, right? That they were like, "Fuck, we've got to meet these expectations," and they're hard expectations to meet.
It's the same thing as like No Man's. So No Man's Sky is a great example for what happened. There's a lot of similarities, right? Where they released a couple of trailers early on, which were same thing: MMO, space, open world. Go and do your own thing.
Infinite,
great,
procedurally generated planets. Yeah, lots of exploration.
Everyone, and it was on PlayStation, which is a massive. Obviously the console aspect adds an extra element to it. This game here, I don't believe, was ever advertised on console.
No, Nvidia did like publish Nvidia, the graphics card manufacturer, published like one of their, here's the day before #RTX on, showing off their rendering stuff in it. So like pumped up by that, but it's not like it wasn't announced on stage at E3 like No Man's Sky.
What's the advantage, Adam? Just explain what's the advantage of it being on console?
Well, one, you get the publisher's money. So Sony backed
legitimizes
No Man's Sky, legitimizes it. And as Tom said, back when they had massive game conferences, it was it's a massive publicity thing because all the attention is centered around these conferences.
And
they don't really do
those
that
games
anymore, but
and those games are thought to be better optimized for that sort of experience, right? Whereas like PC games can be a bit janky initially.
Yeah, there's quality assurance stuff to be released on the PlayStation platforms. Although then again, there's plenty of stuff that's released on the PlayStation Network that does not meet those standards. So take that with a grain of salt.
Cyberpunk 2077 being a good example where they released it. It was like, actually, this is a big bag of shit initially. Let's keep cooking it until it's done, boys.
Anyway, so consoles are generally give you a bit more. If you're going to release it on that, people will go, oh, well, there's obviously some sort of,
someone behind
intelligence behind it. But anyway, they weren't doing it for obviously this. But No Man's Sky, the point being is, then they went out and they overpromised. So you get Sean Murray out there, for instance, for No Man's Sky, saying certain things were going to happen. But the problem is that what happened with No Man's Sky was the hype train exploded, and the developers kept sort of like ticking boxes in people's minds, and internet people like us go, what can it mean, man? What does it mean? What's it going to be, man? And everyone's imaginations start rolling, and then eventually, whatever is released isn't going to happen. That because there is I guess a graph somewhere where it's like, the amount of time you need to be able to implement all these features and to pull this off with the scope. There's scope creep, right? Your scope does not match the resources, time and money and whatever else that you have to actually pull that off.
But it doesn't seem like they ever, this development studio in particular being Fntastic, doesn't seem like they ever really had the things in place that you would need to pull off a massive, because there are massive game studios. Like Rockstar, for example, is putting together GTA 6 at the moment. That is a massive undertaking, right? An open world, online, that is a company that has thousands of employees. This was like, it looked like there was like 12 employees, a bunch of volunteers. Like you were never set up in the first place to be able to pull something as big and as impressive as this off. So like, did you know that and you were just trying to scam people, or were you just like, fooling yourself? You're just completely delusional that you thought you'd be able to pull this off?
I think it's the latter. I think the same thing with No Man's Sky was that they were very ambitious and they just didn't check their own reality after a while.
But the thing with No Man's Sky...
And they didn't manage expectations. Yes, the thing with No Man's Sky is they did eventually fix everything.
Yes, exactly.
At least a full game. But again, they had the backing of Sony. There was an expectation. They had money. They had the funding, whatever the case was. They had the money there to be able to do that. And they did release a game which, was bare bones, but it was sort of did what it was promised on the box, roughly speaking.
Yeah, No Man's Sky, when it launched, was not the game that everyone had hyped up in their own brain, but
it sort of did what it said on the box.
It still was playable and was a game, right? Whilst, the day before seems to be like,
it got a 1 out of 10 from IGN. Yeah. IGN gave She-Hulk an 8 out of 10. And they gave a 1 out of 10.
you've probably got with these startup companies, like I'm assuming it was a startup at the time the trailer was released. They've probably got a bunch of funding. They've got a pitch, and they pitch that. They pitch that, and then they then have to wait for more money to come in. That money might come in from other investors, other creditors. We don't know where their funding was from. Obviously, as you said, they've released other games throughout the last couple of years to try and sort of turn the revenue stream on,
turn the attention into money.
But obviously that hasn't worked. And at the end of the day, they've overpromised something which they never had the resources and were never going to have the resources to obtain. Now, they may be delusional in that. Here's the question. Were they delusional, or were they just being nasty by the end of it? And you could say that at some point it's like once you're on the slippery slide, you can't get off, and it's like they had no sort of choice after a while. The weird thing is,
like either way, they're acting in the exact same way. Like whether it is a scam or not, they're acting in the same way as if it is a scam, right? Like,
well, the thing is, they've released it on early access, and then 4 days later, they've had to close the company and file for bankruptcy. So the question being is, why release it early access
at all?
Yeah. Why'd you have to release it? You didn't have to release it. No one had a gun to your head.
So, well, this is the thing. We don't know. We don't know what investors or people or board members were potentially saying, you've got to do something. You've got to somehow turn the revenue stream on. And they were like, well, let's just do it as an early access game and figure it out from there. And then I guess maybe once the refunds requests start coming in, then you go, well, this is not going to work.
Yeah, because I guess like releasing it, what early access as a premise allows them to do, I guess, is to release it to try and be recouping some revenue on it while they either continue the scam or are like, well, we need to keep developing this to make it what it needs to be, and we can't keep doing that without any kind of revenue stream. But yeah, I guess also if it was all purely a scam to keep the hype running for this one game, while also saying, well, we have other products as well from the makers of the day before. They don't have to release it to keep that scam going, right? Like if you can just maintain the hype with the smoke and mirrors.
At a certain point, though, I think
it was delusional as opposed to I think I feel like the early access release was just a blind shot in the dark. Fuck it, let's just
got to release something.
I think Steam, the platform on which these games are purchased, needs to do something about early access, because we've seen this too many times before, where a publisher has put something up that is clearly not ready, and they get a bunch of pre-order money or they get a bunch of early access money where they'll pay. I'll say, oh, you give us $35. It's not a full game, but you can have access to it now as long as you recognize that it's going to be a bit of a buggy mess. And that works. Like when we played PUBG, right, which was like a massive battle royale game, we did that. We paid for the early access. It was like $30, and it was a buggy mess, but it was still fun as hell. And it did what it said on the tin.
There was a game there.
There was a game happening.
Some jank sometimes.
Yeah, it was janky as fuck, but it was fun. This is it just kind of feels like there's barely
a game.
There's no there. Yeah. Like it's
It's also
Steam needs to do something about it. Like you can't just have situations where people just throw up a bunch of dog shit on a site, and because you get some sexy looking trailer, people start contributing millions of dollars into a game, and then the developer can just turn around and say, "Oh, we're bankrupt, soz, lol," and then maybe you get a refund, maybe you don't. Like Steam needs to take a bit of ownership for what's happening on its platform. I think it's really dangerous for the brand.
I completely agree. I think. And other examples are like, for instance, Star Citizen is like a crowdfunded game that's never quite fully, it's come along and it's still going somehow.
It's the most expensive, I think the highest budget game in history is Star Citizen, because the funding is still coming in from this kind of thing. And it's
still just millions. Money in.
Hundreds of millions.
It's still not technically at full release yet, from my understanding.
No, I don't think so.
That's running on its own release platform, and it had a crowdfunding campaign. It's not necessarily on Steam. I agree. I feel like if Steam is the publisher, if they're the storefront,
it's the retailer.
Look, there's a lot of things they could do. They could do things like, well, if you haven't gone to full release within, say, a year, 2 years, then we take it off the store, for instance, or maybe you cap it. It can be earlier access but the maximum you can charge for early access is $10 or something like that. There's got to be some control over it because there's plenty of games, particularly in the whole like realistic modern shooter.
It's all in this genre, right?
All in this fucking genre. I don't know why.
interesting.
Like, you don't see like Pokemon style games having this kind of fucking mess.
Yeah, Nintendo never releases like an early access game. Like maybe Mario will do something. He's got to survive the zombie apocalypse. They release full games when they're done. And I get that it would be very difficult to build a massive multiplayer online open world role-playing game. Like that's obviously crazy difficult. But like people are still attempting it, knowing how difficult it is to pull off, and people like still getting excited about it and throwing money at it. So
like I'll give you some examples, like Ground Branch, right? A tactical shooter that released in 2018 as an early access, still hasn't released in full to version 1.0. Ready or Not, another tactical shooter, only just released to version 1.0 the other day.
Yeah, releasing in 2018 as early access, and it's still not in version 1.0 for that one. That's 5 years of development time. Like, games take a long time to make now to the caliber that people are expecting. Like fucking we've had 12 years between now and GTA 6 eventually when that comes out. Like these things take a long time. So
imagine if GTA 6 released like this, there'd be riots in the streets.
Oh my god, I'd shudder to think.
But I think, I think back even as early as like Killzone 2, right? This is a game that I used to play. 2005, they released it was a game that was on PlayStation 2. They released a sequel trailer in 2005. I know the trailer you're referring to, yep. That was a pre-rendered concept trailer, but people lost their minds, right? This is like early YouTube.
Yeah.
Like people were losing their minds.
And pre the PlayStation 3. So this was going to be like a title coming out on the PS3, which wasn't out yet. And Killzone 2, they had rendered this trailer. So rather than it running in real time on the graphics engine on the console, this is more like, making a movie like a Pixar movie that they put together. They have rendered it out so you can have so much higher quality, but not someone isn't playing it. But the kind of video they'd put out looked like it was meant to be in-game footage because it was from a first-person perspective. You could see the gun in the camera and shooting the Hellgast guys and stuff. But yeah, people lost their minds. Understandably, when you're being told this is a gameplay trailer.
This is real. They're telling you it's real. They want you to buy it.
And it looks like that. I think I was one of those people being like, holy shit, that looks insane.
And then the developers came out and were like, oh, no. It's a concept.
Yeah. This was a cinematic trailer. This is a cinematic trailer. Like, why did you frame that like a gameplay trailer? Oh my god, we're fucked.
So people, were like, oh, this is going to be shit, And then to their credit, again, about 5 years later, they released the actual game trailer, which is using the game engine, and it looked good. It looked. For the time and day, it ran at like 25 FPS, but it looked pretty. But again, the hype train. You release a trailer, there's all the hype, and then you have to struggle your way to meet the expectations of the internet, which is I feel like if you're a small dev, if you're trying to release something on PC, you're a small dev. Just you got to be really careful how you manage expectations these days.
I think also like consumers need to be smarter. They need to be aware. Like, don't put your money up for pre-orders. Don't put your money up for early access. Like, you need to be incredibly skeptical and look at reviews and see what other people's experiences are before you plonk down your hard-earned money. Because there are people out there, there are studios that are happy to keep stringing you on, keep getting you to pay their bills for 2, 3, 5 years while they build something that they know in all good conscience, they know they could never actually be able to deliver, right? And there are those people out there. And if you just keep throwing money at them because the gaming industry is like flush with cash and so easily permeable to this kind of hype, like you are going to keep encouraging these kind of shysters and hucksters to come out of the woodwork if you just keep throwing easy, dumb money at them. So like,
it reminds me a bit of like Theranos. Like there's, a good intentioned, a well-intentioned sort of genius that has a good pitch. And then obviously,
I think Theranos is a bad example because she was like obviously a huckster that knew her technology didn't work and was spruiking it anyway, and said things like, "We sold it to the military," and it's like that never happened. Like you're just making shit up. Like obviously a huckster.
Like there was some ideals, and people got on board, but like that's how it starts.
If she pulled it off, she would have been Steve Jobs, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and people sort of get behind particularly if you're investors, people look at that and they go, "Oh yeah, we'll put money towards that," and it's. I do know like there are examples of games where like there was another massive multiplayer. What was it called? One released. It was earlier last year.
You have to give me more than that.
Doesn't narrow it down.
Come back to me. I'll find the game.
What kind of genre? Describe the game.
Like No Man's Sky, but like, yeah, you could build stuff. Let me figure it out. Space. Talk about something.
Let's just live here, Adam. Google this. Space game.
Universe. There you go.
Say again.
Dual D-U-A-L. Dual Universe.
Dual.
I've never heard of this.
The Dual Universe was like No Man's Sky, massive multiplayer online. You can fucking build shit.
Anywhere, you can do anything
on the planet and build stuff. And they did release it eventually in, I think, beta format. But basically what happened was their key investor was like, got sick of it. He was like, no, you're just going to release it and you are going to recoup whatever losses we can.
Yeah.
We're going to recoup whatever losses we can. And I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit about the quality of the game. Just release it. And so they did. And they released it. Obviously, it was not what people expected. And now I think it's still, you can still play it, but it's like, a couple of hundred people online, if that.
Well, and that's kind of what happened with Cyberpunk that we talked about earlier as well. That like Cyberpunk was coming along and like on PC, maybe not as optimized as you would like, but playable, especially to people who have like beefier systems. But the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One
was unplayable.
Version was practically unplayable.
I returned mine at launch. I bought a copy. I was so excited. And I was like, okay, it's been launched on console, so it's going to be less buggy than buying the PC version. And it was unplayable.
Yeah,
it was a mess.
And like Cyberpunk had already been delayed a couple times, and flash forward now.
Now it's great. It's the biggest redemption arc in gaming history.
Yeah, 3 years later, and there's a whole bunch of new shit that they've put in there. They've tweaked it a bit. It runs really well on the PlayStation 5. And
they just launched a new DLC.
Stuff, more DLC, and it's all good. So it clearly needed more years in the can, but it was already like 8 years deep. At that point, I think they'd started it around the time that they'd started making The Witcher 3, which had come out already 5 years earlier. So like they've been working on this on and off at least for a while. And yeah, I think there was expectations from the shareholders to be like, you can't keep putting off the release of our investment. Like we're getting annoyed. So you have to eventually release it. So they weren't going to push it back again, even if that meant it runs on the PS4. It runs like shit, but it boots. Boots up.
I just don't understand why gaming studios aren't more sanguine about what it is they can realistically achieve. Like, why overpromise? Like, because there are games out there that are huge financial successes that are not these big, massive multiplayer online role-playing games. Like, like Untitled Goose Game is a great indie game from a developer in Melbourne, and it's not like it doesn't have to be a big tech show. It's just like
you're game of the year.
You're a 2D goose solving puzzles. It's like it's a silly little game, and it's fucking fantastic. Like it doesn't have to be a tech show in order to be worthwhile.
But also some people, and I say players in this instance, I think like it's one of those. I don't know if I want to say this really, but like some of them are
fuck them up, fam.
Like kind of that they don't. What they think is what they want, I don't think is what they want. Like, it's a whole thing like, like the concept of the everything game, which like, that stuff like Star Citizen or No Man's Sky.
And you're going to go and craft and you can trade with other people and you make the fun. We'll just make a huge, elaborate, empty, lifeless world and you can make the game. It's like, why don't you make the game?
It's that weird balance of that were, the players, and I'd include myself in this, that people that play games, they really love maybe a more like unique, organic experience. Like, we've been playing a recent indie early access hit, Lethal Company, recently, right?
Made by one developer, I think.
Real small team. Early access, 15 Australian dollars. So like it's quite cheap to kind of get in and on board. And yeah, it's got some jank to it, but it's smaller in scope, horror sort of focused. And we have a lot of unique moments because of how randomized it is a little bit, that the situations that you're encountering seem like quite bespoke to yourselves. And I remember playing stuff like PUBG and DayZ and all that we talked about before, that the appeal of those games was when you ran into other players and
something
you
unexpected
had like
happens.
a really tense, unique moment for yourself. And that's great. But those happened in the context, well, especially for PUBG, that happened in the context of a game where it's you're all in a big area, hunt each other down. So you had a task and you were doing it. And DayZ, see, that I found kind of tapered off as they tried to make it more and more and more like a survival game where you had to be getting loot. You'd realize after a few hours you are just walking around a big open empty map, collecting cans of beans.
Just completely lifeless.
Maybe you saw a zombie and another player occasionally, but other times you are just like literally a walking simulator, unlike what people call walking simulators, but that's a whole nother argument. But yeah, that idea of the everything game where, they say like our world is so diverse and there's so much to do in it that you will always find something to do. But like those things to do are like collect loot for the sake of it.
There's no gameplay loops, right? There's no mechanic that makes you want to come back and return to it and keep playing it, right?
Yeah. And it's the thing I found with No Man's Sky when it launched. I haven't touched No Man's Sky in years, so I haven't really seen what it's become. But like when I first played it originally, and I was like, oh yeah, so yeah, this planet's massive. Wow, I could probably spend ages on this planet. I'm like, no, I'm bored of it already because it's a shit ton of rocks. Yep, there's a lot of rocks on this planet. And I wonder if there'll be anything over that mountain. More rocks.
Tom, it's going to be rocks for days.
And that's quite, to be honest, that's quite realistic probably when it comes to if I flew to another planet.
But it doesn't make a good game. That's the thing.
Like, that's realistic. But there's got to be more to it. So it's more like, no, developer, give me some script some stuff for me to do.
Yeah, that's your job.
Fun. Like you can't just rely on me to have fun looking at rocks.
I think a lot of it is like
do this.
Developers are just kind of like lax imagination. Maybe they're like, we'll just build the sandbox and then the users will come in and they'll fill it with cool stuff. Because maybe that has happened in some games where it's like the modding community comes in and like changes this and makes it fun.
Example of it working.
Minecraft is a perfect example.
Making their own fun.
Yeah, or like what was that Viking building game that was similar to Minecraft? Valhalla, where it was like you come in, you can build your own thing and make it. And like, that's interesting and fun in its own way if you've got the right mechanics. But like at a certain point, I think most people want to be led. They want some sort of storytelling experience. They don't want to just build. I'd rather have a much smaller, deliberately crafted world that feels full of life than like an extremely like a full planet that's just got nothing going on in it, right? But I think people seem to think bigger is better for some reason. Like, GTA 6 is going to be even bigger than it was. Like, well, could you just make it the same size and just release it maybe in the next 5 years rather than taking
or like
making it 3 times the size and it taking 12 years? Like, I'd rather have something small that's good.
Keep it the same size, but make it more detailed. Like,
or a different setting or whatever. Like,
the technology allows you to maybe make that a world of the same size feel more alive than just going bigger. But I guess so my single sentence summary of I guess the point I was trying to make there was that I think the game that the day before that people believe the day before was going to be before all this probably wouldn't have been any fun anyway.
Yeah, even if they did pull it off somehow.
Argument.
Yeah.
I reckon, It's like, right. No, it still would have been walking around, finding cans of beans in the cars, and maybe you'd run into
simulator!
It's interesting. Like, I mean, Ubisoft have got a really specific formula with some of this stuff, but I mean, the trailer reminded me of The Division. A lot of it was very Division-like, and the mechanics, even of what actually was released, was very Division-like. You go to a couple of storefronts,
I think they literally borrowed assets from The Division,
literally,
like
it's the same third-person style.
The aesthetic, snowy New York.
Style city
kind of place,
and so for reference, in The Division you have, and that Ubisoft did as well. There are things that you do either with a small group, so and you go and do particular missions. There's some story woven through it. You collect loot, you upgrade your gear, and then there is a certain section of the map that is
the dark zone.
The dark zone, which is anyone could be in there, but it's basically an extraction shooter. But they balance that well, so you could just do your own thing. You could do it with some friends, or you could go in and just.
And you had goals to get better gear for the stuff that was outside to improve your experience there.
There was a reason that you had upgrading your shit.
Yeah, but you had the risk of running into other players and having tense firefights. And I remember some of my favorite parts of The Division were where we went into the dark
unexpected moments.
And so those bits are great because it was stressful and fun, but it was smaller and contained, which maybe the day before kind of tried to do. I know, fuck knows how long we've spent doing video game chat on our news.
I love it. This is great.
I think we need to just leave this as a standalone episode, and we'll just do another episode after this because
immediately after.
We've actually run out of time for
but something like that would kind of work. What was I going with that? The Dark Zone in sort of in the Division, but that's almost kind of what the day before went towards. That was another big thing that people complain about. Not only that getting online with friends was hard and the actual core fundamentals of playing the game was fucking difficult, that it wasn't the same genre. So they didn't frame it. They'd framed it as a massively multiplayer online game, say World of Warcraft
on the Steam store.
That there's a lot of players in the same server wandering around. But the game that came out was more of, as the genre Adam mentioned just before, an extraction shooter where you're in a smaller location, you got to get from A to B, try to survive, you die, you lose all your shit, brutal gameplay loop like that. Yeah. So people were like, this isn't even the same genre. That'd be I'm developing a first-person 6v6 Call of Duty multiplayer style game, and then when you buy it, it's FIFA, and you're like, huh? This is just a completely different genre.
Yeah, it's just different to what it said on the tin.
Yeah, so very different to what it said on the tin. So that's the other element of people feeling scammed as well, is that it's a different style of game than the expectation as to what you, the developer, have marketed it as.
Yeah. And it says that on the Steam store as well. Its byline it says it's an MMO.
Yeah.
So so I guess the through lines here are buyer beware. Don't put money into stuff that you don't know anything about. Second thing is don't get hyped about stuff because.
Just accept that life is meaningless and we're all shuffling off this mortal coil at some point, and life is pointless.
Just a healthy amount of hype. You know what I mean? Just a little healthy amount of hype. Last year I was so hyped for God of War Ragnarok. I was super, super, super excited because I loved the last one. And I was hyped to fucking hyped up to the eyeballs. It was one of the few games that I bought full price on launch. I want to fucking play this. And it was a fucking dope game. But I wasn't sitting there being like, it's going to be the everything game where I can be one of the members of the fucking...
I can craft Kratos' ball bag sack.
I can't, I'll be able to, fight monsters and also, have arguments with the other gods and, have my pick from the litter of concubines that all these gods will have in the very super realistic dating sex simulator. No. It was a single player... semi-open, I knew exactly what it was, and it didn't oversell itself, and it was great.
Rather than trying to do everything, just do one thing well.
Yeah.
Stop trying to do everything. It never works.
Once you do one thing well, then we can expand onto two or three or more things. But the everything game, stop wanting it. It is not going to be fun.
And also, Steam, you need to sort your shit out with early access games because it's just literally allows scams.
I love Valve, but I know Valve also tries to do a bit of like an automation-y, like hands-off kind of approach to how they do things sometimes. And like, no, you can't always do that.
Marketplace. We're just buying and selling. We're just allowing people to trade commerce. We're just a marketplace. It's like Facebook being like, we're not the moderators of content. Oh, it's just an open Twitch being like, oh, it's a democracy. You know, like, fuck that.
Yeah.
You have responsibilities if you're pushing shit out into the world.
And making a percentage off it, 100%.
Yes.
100%. We will tag this video in the show notes, but a video from Kira TV called "The Most Popular Game on Steam is a Massive Scam?" ? Which goes through the sort of blow by blow about this, how this whole game came together. It's really entertaining. I would recommend people watch it. So
if an hour of us talking about it wasn't enough for you.
No, I just find all this stuff super interesting because it was like, if it was a movie, that went down like this, people would get sued. You know what I mean? Like, but I think it's because
there will be lawsuits coming. It's just they haven't hit yet. It's been very fresh.
But like, I feel like gaming's kind of still a little bit of the Wild West, and people don't realize that it's actually a massive industry now. Like, the gaming industry is worth more than movies and music and a bunch of other industries combined.
There actually were lawsuits over Cyberpunk, and I think one that only ended relatively recently, and I think it was about the release of the previous gen of the PlayStation 4, sort of it, like the like terrible broken one.
If you sell someone snake oil and tell them it's going to cure their cancer and it doesn't, that's fraud, and you go to jail for that. You know what I mean? Like, there's only some industries like that where, and video games being one of them, where you could just like sell a bill of goods and be like, well, shit happens. That's a quote. That's a quote from the head of the studio. Fntastic. Shit happens.
Yes, yeah, that's right. That tweet's since been deleted. I've noticed. But someone just said like, I think the rest of the quote was someone was just saying, unbelievable that you guys hyped this so much, and this is the end result. You're an absolute disgrace. And they said, this was our first big game. Shit happens. I was like, no. You don't get to just say shit happens.
Shit happens. I'm just gonna grab this bag and run.
Yeah.
Anyway, News Politics Podcast.
Other stuff.
Should we actually just like cut the episode there and then just do
I mean,
one?
We'll just talk through the last couple of stories. We've got 15 minutes, so I think we'll get through what we get through.
I mean, there's like 7 of them, but sure, let's go.
No, there's not. There's 5. Kathleen Folbigg, people. So it's a News and Politics podcast. Sorry about that gaming digression. That was fun though. Kathleen Folbigg had convictions in the I believe it was the 90s and for killing her 4 kids, and those convictions have since been overturned. So there has been she was once labeled the nation's worst female serial killer, this week there was she was convicted of killing 4 of her children, and that's been quashed by the New South Wales Court of Criminal Appeal. She spent 20 years in prison for the deaths of her toddlers between 1989 and 1999 in the Hunter region. And it turns out, and this is a bit of recent science that's happened, is that it was uncovered that all 4 of her kids were likely to have had a genetic defect that meant that was responsible for them passing away of, they thought it was SIDS, I guess, at the time, and that they died unexpectedly. There wasn't any physical evidence at the time that Catherine had harmed her children in any way. They were but I suppose people just thought, if 4 of your kids turn up dead, it must be you. And there was some circumstantial evidence from a diary where she said she felt as though she had killed them, but imagine you've had 3 kids die unexplained, the amount of trauma and stress and depression that you would be under from that experience. You go, all you want to do is have a family, and the kids that you create keep dying. Like, that would fuck anyone up.
Oh yeah, you'd be like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah, so of course you blame yourself. But basically what the courts found is that, she wasn't to blame and her conviction's been overturned. So based on this genetic defect, that would make SIDS much more likely.
So I guess that's good news for her, at least. I mean, the children are still dead, so that's obviously that's that's horrible and sad, but it's a relief to know that that the answers have been provided, I guess, for all of that that science and genetics has come up with a way for us to understand this in a way that would have just been like just baffling and confusing in 1999, and doesn't give her the last 20 years of her life back, but certainly having your name cleared and being able to walk around with your head
held high would be good. So
I mean,
it's just a rare example of the justice system working correctly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, 20 years too late. But I mean, there's a whole generation of people that wouldn't really know who she is anyway. I mean, I was very unfamiliar with it. I think there was a report that came out. The reason why this was overturned was that there was a commission or an inquiry basically into it, and there was a report issued, which is why the evidence from that report is what was used to overturn the conviction. So yeah, I mean, I don't know whether she could walk into a shop and no one would be any the wiser, I would assume, but
Maybe.
justice works. And speaking of justice, the next story is that Australia will become the first country to ban engineered stone benchtops. So what is an engineered stone benchtop? An engineered stone benchtop is a benchtop that looks like stone, but it's not stone that someone's dug out of the ground. It's stone that is basically smashed together or created using different materials and ingredients.
It's like a turducken granite.
Yeah. Exactly, correct. It's a composite material, if you will.
Turducken.
If you don't know what a turducken is, Google it, and then if you are hungry afterwards, then I don't know, talk to Tom.
Yes, Google it, and if you have healthy arteries, I guess you could give it a go. But I think if you have any semblance of maybe cholesterol, don't.
Isn't it like cooking a duck inside a turkey? It's insane.
Yeah,
it's like something that they would do at the Capitol in the Hunger Games.
There's also a chicken. That's why it's the turducken.
Right.
Yeah,
as
three,
a chicken
three
as
birds.
well.
Three
That
birds.
makes
Turkey, duck, and chicken.
Well, that makes even less sense.
At Thanksgiving are like, it sounds pretty good.
Sounds pretty good.
Engineered stone benchtops, they are immensely popular. You would likely, if you're in Australia, and you've built a home in the last 20 years, you'll likely have one in your home.
I have one in my house.
Is it because it's cheaper? It's cheaper than?
Way cheaper.
It's much cheaper. Right.
Yeah.
If you're paying buying marble or granite, it's prohibitively expensive. The other option you have basically is a laminate benchtop. But the problem is with engineered stone is that it basically is hazardous for your health if you're cutting it. So there is an illness called silicosis, which is basically where you breathe in some of the dust from cutting this stone, and it basically kills you. It can kill you pretty quickly in a couple of years, or it can kill you over the course of a number of years. And the rates of tradespeople that have been getting sick with silicosis has been on the rise, given the prevalence of engineered stone in Australia. Now, there are different types of stone. There are some that have the active ingredient which causes silicosis, and there are others that don't. But they're all engineered stone, and they're all kind of bad, I guess. There's not a heap of, this is the other thing, is there's not a mountain of evidence in terms of like with asbestos, where they had the length of time to be able to really sort of analyze asbestos, which is another building material, and its effects. But I think the good thing about this is we've learned from asbestos and we've gone, it's probably bad. Let's get on the front foot and ban it. So Australia's
maybe do something about it before it's a catastrophe.
Well, it may already be a catastrophe. We just don't know yet, right?
You say that, but I mean, the Hawks Nest Tunnel disaster in West Virginia in America was in the 1930s, where a bunch of workers died on the job mining getting silicosis from mining silica. We know this stuff is not good for people's health, and we have known for decades.
Yeah,
right?
and a big part of I thought a big part of the rise of the cases. So Adam, you'll probably be able to correct me on this if this is a little inaccurate, but I thought a big part of the issue is, as you say, a home built in the last 20 years probably has this kind of stone, but it's more the conditions with which they are cutting them, right? Because you can cut these stones in a safe manner.
Well, you see people
in a warehouse somewhere, it's in a very controlled environment. But if it's oh shit, we're building this benchtop in the 8th home this week, and oh shit, it's a foot too long. Oh, I'll just cut it here on the site.
Yeah,
correct.
And then, so the other aspects of the terrible capitalist system we find ourselves in of expediency and
it's 100%. And Victoria had, and I think some other states had already put in controls around this, where it has to be a wet cut in a controlled environment with extraction fans and all the appropriate PPE.
So
must
a wet
be
cut
worn.
being there's water being projected onto
Water
the thing
being-
as it's being cut,
which-
so dust doesn't kick up, right? And
Exactly right.
Wearing PPE equipment and all that.
But I like this is only a really recent thing. Like I remember specifically a couple of years ago in my job going, why? Because the kitchen sink didn't fit. I was like, why can't they just cut it? Like, why can't they just go and do it? Can we get a stonemason? And then the supervisors were kind of unaware of it all. Like, oh yeah, we'll just call some people, see if they can go and do it. They didn't, thankfully. The manufacturer came back and went, absolutely
you
fucking not.
stupid.
It's like, that is unsafe.
So good, but like, you know, I imagine for a time people were doing that.
Yeah.
You know, local tradies, stonemasons who probably may not have been as familiar with the product, maybe, I don't know. And I guess the other interesting thing about this is that, like, what's going to replace it? There's now a massive gap in the market because a lot of builders will have this as their standard inclusion. You buy a house, you get one of these bench tops. You can go to a laminate, which is just a timber bench top with a, yeah, they're not great. Very 90s. Or you can go to marble. There might be some other products.
I think a lot of people probably end up going wood bench tops because
maybe.
it's cheaper, but it still looks nice. But yeah, like stone has been the default because it's like, yeah, it looks good. It obviously doesn't look as good as like marble or something like that, but it's nice. It's not porous.
It lasts.
Like it lasts.
It doesn't fade as much, you know, like it's
hard to damage.
Easy to clean.
hard to damage.
Yeah, hard to damage unless you like really like take a mallet to it or something. But like, but good that we're kind of like it may be too late. It's not too asbestos late, but might be too late for it to have, so you know, to save in a lot of other ways. But I guess it's good to be proactive sort of on this if we've started to see some evidence that this is bad, so let's ban it. But
I'm just
you're right, it
relieved that
leaves a big hole in like
in the
construction
market.
industry, right? That either like, you know, houses are expensive enough.
I'm
I
just
don't know what we'll do, but I'm assuming that. But like, these things also force manufacturers, builders, whatever, to innovate, right? So this will actually probably be a good thing in some ways. They'll probably come up with something worse. I don't know, but
they just go, have you heard? Asbestos makes a good bench top.
Just the hardened tears of migrant children actually makes a very excellent bench top space. The thing that I like about this though is that it's like it seems like a pretty straight line from like a report being generated. Like, because I remember there was reports of the report coming out a couple weeks ago, like a month or two ago. And then they're like, yeah, they're probably going to ban stone bench tops as a result. And the government got the report and looked at it, and then they did. I was like, hey, government works. It's such a little thing to be like excited about, to be like, someone wrote a white paper and then someone actually fucking read it and then they did something about it. Like, hey, that's the way it's supposed to go. Nicely done.
I think unfortunately it is through, you know, the deaths of people that has become a thing. And it's also because of, I think, without the asbestos furore that happened 10, 20 years ago, you probably wouldn't have seen this, I think. I think people have seen that. Government,
people are a bit more wise to it now, yeah.
They go, this could come back and bite us and not just be like one or two people. It could be tens of thousands of people. You know, like that's how many stonemasons we're talking about here.
Well, that's also the system working in a way that you rarely see it, right? It's like, what? We're learning from our mistakes?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Speaking of learning, or not learning from his mistakes, Peter Dutton is the most unpopular member of parliament, I believe.
Well, Australia's least trusted politician. So that is state and federal, which is that, like, if you're talking about the Dickies, the Dickhead Olympics, then Peter Dutton just took home the gold. This isn't really a story so much as it is the result of that's the whole story. He's Australia's least trusted politician. Penny Wong's among the most trusted politicians. You know, that's it. I just thought it was funny because it makes fun of Peter Dutton, and I don't like Peter Dutton, so that's why it's in the rundown.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty funny. Like any further opportunity to stick the boot in to be like, Peter, like as much as you've tried to like reinvent your image since becoming leader of the Liberal Party, people really fucking hate you, bro.
He's not a monster. Have you tried voting for someone who's not a murderer?
Just what a piece of shit. And I thought like he dethroned Scott Morrison, I thought was the previous one, right?
least trusted.
Hey,
yeah.
the guy you replaced Scott Morrison with in an effect to save face has just taken the gong. Like,
Morrison, who secretly appointed himself 5 ministerial positions. So that was from Roy Morgan, the pollster for that one there, their 2023 distrust list.
I did see something interesting, which was that, obviously Penny Wong took the most trusted title for the second straight year. But she beat out the Country Liberal Party Senator Jacinta Price, who was the second most trusted. I was like, wait, what? Jacinta Price was number 2?
Wow.
That just shows the divide in this country. I was like, whoa. Jacinta Price. Are we talking about the same Jacinta Price who said a bunch of virulent lies about the voice referendum is the second most trusted?
Well, I guess she was the second most trusted the year before.
By the other side. Who?
I guess the year before, but the year before the voice happened, right? So I assume it was 2022's second most trusted was Jacinta Price. Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm saying this year she was the second most trusted.
After it? Wow. Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And people are like, where's Jackie Lambie? I was like, Jackie Lambie? What are you guys smoking out there? What's going on? Pauline Hanson was on the trusted list. I was like, what the fuck's going on?
I think the thing is with a lot of this as well is that like a lot of these firebrand senators, Jackie Lambie,
speaks the truth, says it how it is.
Exactly. There's that adage of like, there's those people go, they're not talking bullshit, they're talking real talk. I
mean,
they say the dumb shit that I have in my head back to me in a lady's voice. I like them.
Mean, to be fair to them, I'd argue that at least
I trust that whatever Jackie Lambie or Pauline Hanson says is what they think.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's the sort of thing of if they, like,
it doesn't mean it's good, but it is what they think.
I have full faith that what they're presenting to me is what I'm getting, which I guess in the sense of, would I vote for them or not is important. So, yeah, right, I trust that they're honest about their thoughts and views on what they talk about in Parliament. That doesn't mean that I'm a Pauline Hanson fan.
But I do believe that Pauline Hanson is being forthright with her racist vitriol. I believe she is telling me the honest truth when she says we're being swamped by Muslims / Asians / next minority group that we're looking to dunk on.
Yeah, like I don't believe that is a front in order to score votes. That is real. It is also to score votes, but it's real.
But it's terrible.
Yeah. Interesting. And Penny Wong being the most trusted. Like, I guess, all right. I don't know. I guess I don't have sort of immediate feelings sort of as to why to distrust her per se. I thought, she's had a lot of sort of really weak responses about what's going on in Palestine right now. But so not someone who'd immediately jump to the top of my list if I was trying to think of politicians I trust. But
I think she's generally been a steady hand. Like, you never see her raising her voice. She's always pretty measured. Like, even when people are being unreasonable to her, like she comes back at them with like a very calm, sort of placid air. You don't ever get the sense that she's obfuscating. She doesn't waffle. Yeah, no. I think she's a pretty good one for top trusted. Although Albo's probably looking at his back, going, "Oh, just I hope,
shit.
I hope I don't find a knife in there anytime soon." But
although the Prime Minister, I mean, they can't put a Prime Minister in from the Senate; it has to be from the lower house.
Yeah, she's from the Senate, so she'd need to be in the lower house in order to be Prime Minister. But like, I don't
know.
Things
have happened. That has happened before.
Crazier things have happened in the Labor Party this decade. So,
speaking of crazy things, our next story is a little bit insane. There are, earlier this month, an estimated 1,200 tons of sardines and mackerel were found floating on the surface of the sea of the fishing port. Should have practiced this one. Hakodate? I'll spell it out. Hakodate. In Hokkaido, which is basically forming like this silver blanket, which is stretching for more than a kilometer. And officials in recent days have said they've got no idea why that has happened.
Wow.
Hi there, George Tipos, keeping it real times. Is this a signifier of the end times, and should we be cracking open each other's skull and feasting on the tasty goo inside?
Yeah, potentially. Basically, they're thinking it could be like potentially maybe they all got cornered in there en masse because of some fish that were hunting them. There has been some people, a British newspaper, the Daily Mail, so take this with a grain of salt. They tried to link the phenomenon to the release of the tainted water from the Fukushima nuclear powered plant, which has now been treated. It was okayed by the World Atomic Agency and all that kind of stuff. And there's a 4-month gap there. So it'd be a bit random if all the fish randomly died like that. But
it just seems like a scene at the start of a zombie apocalypse like collapse movie where they're like, fish have turned up in their thousands in Japan, you know, like, and then it cuts to like people screaming in the streets. Apparently, there's a case of rabies that travels from people biting. Yeah, the rage virus is out of control. Britain has been sealed off. They're to commence carpet bombing in the ensuing days. Like,
honestly, I just think the marketing campaign for the announcement of the A24 adaptation of Death Stranding has gone too far.
That is such a good joke that no one except us will understand.
I don't even know.
It's the beach from Death Stranding.
Anyone who stuck around after an hour of the day before chat, I think will get it.
Good point.
But yeah, these fish scenes are crazy. I mean, we've had mass fish deaths in Australia, but they tend to be in river systems where like the oxygen levels
also not good. I'd like to point out. Also bad.
No. But this is in the ocean, so it's kind of a little bit more unusual. Anyway, they've had to go clean them up, which I imagine would be a yucky and smelly job.
It's just always concerning when, like, you know, something like this happens and you're always like, oh my God, that's so awful. 1,200 tons of fish. And that the experts are like, we don't fucking know.
Yeah, I don't fucking know. Don't look at me.
That always makes it concerning for me. It's like, whoa, we have zero explanation as to why all these fish turned up. Like, you know, you can tell me if it's something like, I don't know, like, I used too much electricity this month and make me feel bad about it. But when they're like, all the fish died.
I don't know why the lightning's coming down without making any thunder sounds. I'm sure it's probably fine and not aliens. I'm sure it'll be fine.
A reference to a chat we were having the other day. But yeah, it's fine.
Referencing the private group chat on the podcast is always good gear.
Yeah, it's good. No one understands what that means.
It's a scene. It's a scene from. It's a scene from War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
The Tom Cruise one, not the recent TV show,
or the original film or book,
or the original radio play.
Yeah.
Yep. Probably the worst one. Rudy Giuliani has been ordered to pay nearly $223 million to 2 US election workers he has been found that he defamed.
Speaking of the worst one, Rudy Giuliani.
Man.
So there were 2 election workers. So during the impeachment trials that occurred a while ago regarding Donald Trump and his interference in the 2020 election.
So this is the second impeachment trial, right?
The second one, yeah.
The second one.
The second, what is it? The birth. Better than the first. Anyway, the second impeachment trial, 2.0. This time it's personal, electric boogaloo. Trump was, was some of the people who were testifying against Trump and the Trump side for the impeachment trial were Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, Freeman's daughter. And they were 2 election workers who described their experience being personally called out by Donald Trump on Twitter and sort of victimized, accused of all these terrible, awful crimes. And Rudy Giuliani also sort of went on television and tried to substantiate these baseless claims that they had
said his Rudy Giuliani shit.
Yeah. He just went full Rudy on them and basically accused them of a bunch of terrible things. And it really disrupted these women's lives. They were being accosted in their communities, harassed online, sort of forced to be scared for their safety, enduring a number of death threats, all this sort of thing, all for the crime, quote unquote, of just like being an elections worker counting votes and like trying to do a service for their community. So this case has been completed. A Washington DC jury has ordered Rudy Giuliani to pay $150 million to these 2 election workers for the harm caused by his defamatory statements that he made about them following the 2020 election. So Ruby Freeman was awarded $24 million for defamation, well, 16 million US dollars, and 20 million US dollars for emotional distress. 20 million for emotional distress. That's not bad. Shay Moss, Freeman's daughter, was awarded 16,998,000 US dollars for defamation and $29 million for emotional distress. I love the specific figures. Like, we think that it was precisely worth $16,171,000. It's like, how possibly did you get to that figure?
And also, there's I guess in this case though, that those dollar figures, like regardless of the specificity down for each of them, the daughter got more than the mother.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, you were clearly more emotionally distressed than she was.
Yeah,
like,
I guess that's the implication.
I mean,
right?
like maybe there's details in here of like,
it gets weird whenever you start putting numbers to these things.
Yeah, there was more like instances of being harassed or whatever for one over than the other. But it's kind of like, no, they were both emotionally traumatized. Like and if it's 150 million, just 75 million each.
Well, and here's the thing. The jury also awarded 75 million USD in punitive damages to both plaintiffs. So it's just like a little bit of sprinkle for defamation, a little bit of, for emotional distress, and an extra, just sprinkle in 75 million extra just because fuck you, Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah, you know what? Because it's Rudy Giuliani, double it.
Yeah, that's a $75 million asshole tax for Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah.
That's fuck you money in the sense that, like, fuck you don't have any money anymore.
Well, this is the thing, is that during the trial, Giuliani repeatedly highlighted how he doesn't have funds to pay his various debts or to respond to the case. And yeah, basically, I guess the question is, is he actually going to have the money to stump up?
Well, he doesn't have $150 million. He probably has a couple of $1 million, and it'll go through a whole court process and they'll negotiate down from that. But I love that the jury was just like, hey, if you're leaving it up to us, you're going to have to pay fucking crazy money, Rudy. You're going to be on the hook for this for the rest of your goddamn life if it's up to us.
You talk all that shit.
Talk shit, get back, as they say.
More than $200,000 for some of Freeman and Moss's attorney fees, which he hasn't paid. Giuliani also owed more than $1 million to defense attorneys who have helped him on other matters, prompting them to sue him this year, and hadn't paid nearly $60,000 for years of old phone bills.
So get it, mate. Get an unlimited plan. What's going on? 60,000 of phone bills? Yeah,
I assume it's billable hours on the phone.
Go and get an Amasim.
I don't know.
$25, unlimited talk and text. Not an ad.
Yeah, absolutely insane. I also rather enjoy how every case involving Rudy Giuliani just gives us a plethora of more like all-timer Giuliani photos. Like there's one, it's not in this article, unfortunately, but I saw it pop up earlier where it's just him, like, you know how he always looks like bug-eyed?
Yeah.
Like his eyes are just exploding out of his head.
That's
his
the
mouth's
cocaine.
open, but he's also just holding a festive Christmassy Starbucks cup. I'm just like, this is great. Hang it in a museum. What a picture.
You would not believe what's in the Starbucks cup.
Now.
And it is not coffee.
Yeah.
I love how the hero of 9/11 just fucking ended up being like
Times Person of the Year in 2001 as well.
He was literally called America's mayor. Like Rudy Giuliani, hero of the revolution, mayor of New York during 9/11, famously as a prosecutor helped to take down the mob in New York. Like if he had have finished in 2002, it would have been the GOAT.
Never heard from again.
And it was never heard from again. Greatest of all time. I've never seen a bigger fall from grace than Rudy Giuliani. Like considering his bones and where he came from, like it's such a spectacular fall.
He also did the whole stop and frisk thing in like New York during that tenure, and that's bad.
That's bad.
He would have had that legacy hanging over his head.
But like it's so funny that like to go from a figure that was like pretty much nationally loved to being so reviled. And, you understand why he was leaking that time in front of Four Seasons Landscaping. It's because that's how his species cries.
Well, yeah, it's because the end of all things was on the phone and he was Zorg. There's another niche reference for you guys. Is it niche? I think enough people have seen The Fifth Element.
So, on that note...
Fuck you, Rudy Giuliani.
Fuck you, Rudy. Eat shit. I hope you pay out the ass
Yeah.
for the rest of your life. He lost his license, his law license, so I don't know how he's going to make money in order to give, but I hope he has to make.
That's why he's
bunch
not
of money.
defending himself in all these cases and racking up all these debts.
I just, sometimes bad things happen to bad people. I wish you all the worst, Rudy.
Yeah.
On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at our handle, at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and mother flippin' TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can follow me down to Port Phillip Bay where I'll be investigating fish.
I thought you were going to go say, follow me down to Fntastic Studios where I'll be pitching a new MMO RPG open world shooter. This time I'm going to nail it. This time's the time. I can feel it in my bones.
Adam, do you have any development experience? Nope.
None whatsoever. You're hired.
Hey, you spend all that time coding missions in everyone's favorite dad game, Arma 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's all I can do, Tom. I'm a one-trick pony.
Is actually the most experienced member of the team at Fntastic Games as a result. So,
yeah. Hey, DayZ started as a mod for Arma 2, so
Yeah.
there you
Turns
go.
out though, the Arma 3 engine is not exactly industry standard these days.
it's not top of the line, top tier stuff.
No.
Thanks for listening to Gaming Chat. Love your faces. We'll see you next week where we will talk about mostly news.
It'll be Christmas Eve, so probably not next week.
Probably
No,
not next week.
I'm in Tasmania. We'll have a week
Alrighty.
off.
We'll
Week
see.
after New Year's Eve.
We'll see you when we're looking at you. All right. Bye.
Bye.